What is up, guys? Pie Muffin here, and we are back with our second to last Trails into Reverie video. So, last time we did our first story here to conclude, or I guess to start off our journey into the Calvard Republic and finish off our journey here in Trails into Reverie, which was a story about Renne going to Long Lie over in Calvard and coming face to face with, seemingly an eight leaves, one blade practitioner that is far beyond him. Okay, it's gonna do this whole thing again. And he pretty much ends up, he was obviously in Long Lie to look for his missing master, but of course that never came to be. But yeah, so now we're gonna move on to our second story here. An unconventional student. So let's check it out. The only reason I gave such a brief explanation at the start of this video is because I pretty much explained the whole thing at the end of the last one. Alright, April year 1208 of the Septian calendar. Okay, so 3 months after the Renne story we just read. And pretty much exactly a year after the events of Trails into Reverie. Alright, let's check it out. Aramis Academy is a famous educational institution in the Calvardian capital of Edith. The name derives from an artist central to Calvard's democratic revolution 100 years ago. This was also reflected in its goal of nurturing new talent and helping forge a brighter future for a new republic. The Academy placed great value on traditional education, of course, but it also encouraged the perspectives of new cultures and values, attracting many an independent mind from across Lemuria. So much different than a military academy, that's for sure. It was a storied place of learning that reflected the Republic's views as a whole. This story, for its part, begins not long after the springtime festival held yearly to welcome the new student body. It was just another morning at the academy, countless students shuffling through its grounds, when one of them in particular happened to draw an unusual amount of attention. The young lady had long, soft violet hair crowned with a black ribbon. Her figure had been cut very respectably as she matured into a young woman of 17 years, and yet her face still held traces of girlhood days bygone. The beauty she was, she never failed to turn inquisitive heads as she strolled along. Hi, Renne. So, this is where Renne is at. So, in 1208, Renne is attending Aramis Academy in the Calvard Republic. So, I guess she's done at Genus Royal Academy. Her name was Renne Bright. She was a second-year student from Genus Royal Academy in Liberal, now studying at Aramis as part of an exchange program. Okay. She had only just arrived in the spring. Renne's goal in attending was not to further her education. Yeah, she's a genius. She doesn't even need to go to school. She had been considered highly gifted since she was a child. Yeah, she's also saved the world a couple of times. Having already earned several doctorates in years past, there was a little more a new academy could reasonably teach her. Her goal, in reality, was to use it as a front to operate freely in Calvard. Okay. She says operate, I'm assuming just, like, keep track of everything that kind of goes on. It was hard to find one better than being a student. She already found the role relatively foolproof during her time at Genus. Even if there were limits to how much a student could get away with, society as a whole was soft on school children. To move freely would also require drawing as little attention as possible. She aimed to conduct herself modestly, as any elegant young lady who wished to remain unseen should during her time at Aramis. There was just one very big problem with this plan. Good morning, Miss Bright. Isn't she just gorgeous? Look, I see her. She's so beautiful, and everyone says she's just as smart, too. All she had to do was walk down the hall to be showered with greetings and whispers of envy and admiration. Her looks alone were already enough to make her the talk of the school, but after one of the teachers let slip that she received a perfect score on her entrance exam, there was suddenly not a single person who didn't know her name. Maybe she shouldn't have tried so hard. And then she would have had a better cover. The other students care not how much she wanted to avoid drawing attention. She was getting it whether she liked it or not. Naturally, not everyone was pleased with the booming popularity this new transfer student had attained in less than a month. While most were fawning over Renne's arrival that morning, another group watched the charade unfold from the shadows, echoing audible tuts of displeasure. Renne had yet to be enrolled in any club, so as soon as the day's lessons had come to an end, she packed her belongings and stood to leave. A word, if I may, Miss Bright. It was a fellow classmate, surrounded by a small faction of students clearly loyal to their King Bee. Oh boy, this guy looks like trouble. Certainly. Though instinct told her this was not going to be a conversation she wanted to have, she made an effort to pretend otherwise. She would not be provoked into behaving as anything but a mature, modest young lady. I've been wanting to get to know you better for some time now, you see, so I was wondering if you might join me for dinner this evening. So this guy's like a scumbag, like those other people who were like, kidnapping the St. Estrella students. The boy, Ronald Griffith, presented a gentlemanly smile. Gentlemanly, huh? Renne was very much used to being asked out like this, and never once did she accept. She always made up some excuse to turn them down. Today would be no different. I'm ever so sorry, but I'm afraid I have something urgent to take care of after school today. Some other time, perhaps. This was usually enough to get them to give up, but Ronald was a persistent one. Well, that won't do. I have something very important to discuss with you, and I've already booked us a table at a very fine restaurant so we can discuss in detail. Is there really no way your business can wait? There was something ominous about his smile. Renne couldn't help but be curious what he was thinking. I'm afraid it can't. I'm so sorry after you've gone through the trouble to prepare ahead of time. Still, I could spare a little time now, so I'd be happy to talk here if that's alright. So not tonight, then. A pity. Ronald's tone read one less of genuine sadness and more irritation that things were not going according to plan. Well aware that he let slip his true feelings on the matter, he quickly composed himself and smiled. Now is better than never, I suppose. This does concern everyone in the room, so perhaps it's all the better said here. To this, Renne glanced around the room, noticing that only she, Ronald, and his lackeys were all who remained. Most were likely on their way home or in their respective clubs, while some would have ordinarily been in the classroom at this hour. She was certain none wanted anything to do with Ronald and his group. He took a step toward her and began to speak. I'm well aware, Miss Bright, that you have come all the way from distant Liberal to be here. It is not unusual for students to transfer from afar for family reasons. But I hear in your case you came to Calvert just to learn in these hallowed halls. Cannot help but deeply admire your spirit and thirst for knowledge. Pure theatrics, this one. At the same time, I worry about you. Brilliant you may be, but living alone in a far-off land must be terribly lonely and challenging affair. We all need someone to depend on in our lives. Yeah, she's got like 50-plus people who can come to her aid if she needs them. And that would be especially so in your situation. The easiest, obviously she can't just go saying like, oh, by the way, I'm the Angel of Slaughter, nice to meet you. But that would get him to back off instantly if she did. So if you don't mind me saying so, Miss Bright, I believe you're in need of someone to look after you, to protect you. Oh, this guy's funny. Oh, this is funny. At last he shut up, giving Renne a chance to respond. She scrutinized him closely. In short, you'd like me to join your circle of friends, correct? Ronald's smarmy smile broadened. His father was a senator in the Republic's parliament, meaning he had a significant amount of political power. His son used this to his advantage. So it's just, like I said, it's like the guys at St. Estrella. You know, his father was like the owner of the bank in Heimdallar or whatever, so he was able to get away with a lot of stuff. His son used this to his full advantage ever since he joined the academy. Ronald had used his father's name to form a faction of sorts among the students, forcibly building his reputation until he was the leading candidate for student council president in the election stage in half a month's time. Well, I'd say Ash Carbide is a lot nicer than this guy. His goal, Ren assumed, was to bring the hottest talk of the Academy into his faction to further secure his chances of victory. I think you'll find that joining us would help you feel much more secure and at home here. Or perhaps you don't yet appreciate just how much of a difference having someone like me backing you would make on the life of an exchange student. True, she mused inwardly. Being in a group of high social standing would make it easier for her to gather information. If she could leverage his father's connections to build more of her own, that would pay itself in dividends in the days to come. Okay, but why is she specifically here? What is she trying to learn while here in Calvard is the real question. The pompous boy had no way of knowing the actual circumstances that brought her to Aramis. Well, I'm not aware either, but his proposal was, in fact, very beneficial to her. She returned his smile with a modest one of her own as she answered, "You're kind to think of so much of me, but I'm afraid I'll have to decline." Clear, unambiguous rejection. Ronald's lips were still curled into a smile, but he could not hide the twitch in his brow, nor could his lackeys hide their shock. They had, by all accounts, expected her to answer the opposite. "Are you sure you won't reconsider, Miss Bright? Surely someone as brilliant as yourself can see why accepting my offer would be in your best interest. I fear if you don't now, you may well come to regret it." His last words were a hair slower and deliberate to intimidate her. Renne, of course, was never going to fall for it. I'll admit it is a tempting proposal, tempting enough to inspire one to consider helping a certain someone win the student council election. If only that someone weren't you. What did you just say? The sudden taunt caught him completely off guard, resulting in a flare of irritation escaping him. Renne, for her part, was unruffled by the change. I imagine you don't need me to explain why, but I will to be sure. I've been very aware that the threatening glares I always attract on the way to school every morning have been coming from all of you. They've been a constant in my life ever since before the festival. All were flabbergasted by the statement, their silence confirming what she said to be true. She continued. Now, you have every right to regard me with caution. I'm well aware how much I stand out despite my best efforts. Taking potential threats under your own wing is a strategically sound move too. However, that your target was so easily able to see through your scheme shows everyone here how inept you really are. Good job, Renne. I have better things to do than assist someone so incompetent and small-minded. With a shrug and a sigh in a somewhat dramatic fashion, Renne stood before Ronald, his shoulders trembling from rage. Good day to you all. Renne gave a courteous nod of acknowledgement before leaving the room, paying no mind to the wide eyes and open slack jaws she left behind. Whew. So Agate ended up getting pretty beat up from another one of Mom's crazy jobs she threw at him. Well, we did get some good data out of it, but ouch. Your mom is always so funny. That night in the dormitory, Renne and Tita were engrossed in deep conversation through their laptops. But it's always the same old with all of you. I'm surprised there's anything of Agate left with how often you tell me she has him nearly facing death. You two are in a rut. I know something could spice things up, but maybe try adding a little romance into the mix, like a couple of bright-eyed lovebirds we know. Oh, we have agreed to go somewhere next week, so we're not in a complete rut. Well, isn't that something? The stairs to adulthood await you, my dear friend. So I assume this is when Tita went back home after graduating at Thor's. Wait, what did she say, April? Yeah, so this should definitely be after graduation. Renne. Oh, yep, okay, here we go. Tita graduated from the branch campus in Arabonia just as Renne left for Calvard, leaving them no time to spend with one another in person. This wasn't ideal, of course, but from a hint of sadness came the habit of talking like this once a week, so they could stay in each other's lives. They discussed anything, from their new lives and environments to the fruits of their research, occasionally stumbling into a serious topical matter or two along the way. It sounds like a legal confrontation between the Verne Company and Epstein Foundation is inevitable at this point. I know, I can't believe this is really happening. Both frowned at their screens. A recent development concerning the Calvardian industrial giant Verne Company had become a key source of concern for them of late. Oh? Oh, right! This is the thing they were talking about. The little group they were putting together. So you can obviously see Tio there on the left. That's Erica. You've got Schmidt. And then you've got Tita's grandfather. It began soon after Crossbell returned to normalcy after the Supreme Leader's takeover the previous year. Professor Erica Russell approached the Verne Company to propose that they join the West Zemurian Tech Union she had been hard at work forming. Yep, we learned about that in Tita's story. To no one's surprise, they refused. But before Erica and the rest of the engineers involved could even finish getting ready to go and change Verne's mind, something happened to make the Union the least of anyone's priorities. The independent development of a new generation of orbments and their generations, long partner in this subset of technology, the Epstein Foundation, would not be a collaborator. The latter had been key supporters of Zemuria's orbital development and orbital technology in general since their very inception. Battle orbments were no exception to this. The Foundation had known their way around them since the very first model, drafting the incredible concept that had been used as a base ever since. Even the Reinford Company, before the Battle of Jormungandr, had not thought to develop their Arcus models on their own, instead favoring to develop them in partnership with the Storian Institute. The announcement was quite simply unprecedented and sent shockwaves through the industry. The Epstein Foundation was also less than pleased about being cast aside in this manner. Wait, so I'm confused. Who backed out? The independent development. So the Epstein Foundation was not going to work with the tech union, I guess? While there were certainly legal concerns regarding who owned the patent to this technology, the greater concern was that their stable position in the industry as a whole was now becoming unstable. They initially responded by attempting to resolve this through peaceful means, but when those attempts proved fruitless, it was reported that they were preparing for what could only be an ugly international legal dispute. I'd say Verne has the upper hand if this ever makes it to court. Unlike their previous Ramda orbments, this sixth generation is designed to set a whole new standard. All of its main features are packed with new tech, with some new features still being kept under wraps. I wonder what those are. What could they be trying to develop that's important enough to ruin their relationship with the Foundation? Though I have heard about the government telling the Verne Company to focus on more weapons development. I have too. It sounds like they're planning to significantly revamp the military's weaponry. The official story is that they're planning on slimming the military down. But if they're pairing that with the latest weapons development, then they're still just as powerful, maybe more so. As part of the war's ceasefire agreement, Erebonia was required to downsize their military, bringing it more in line with that of Calvard's. Yet, if the Republic were to expand the capabilities of its military, this recently forced equilibrium in superpowers would quickly be broken. Yeah, that if Erebonia gets lesser military, and then Calvard keeps the same military but just gives it more power, then it's not so even anymore. Whatever may be true, I've got a lot of questions I need answers to. Maybe it'd be worth visiting the Verne Company's headquarters in Basel at some point. You haven't learned anything more about where Professor Hamilton is at the moment, right? Nothing new or concrete, at least. It sounds like she's continuing her research eastward, but I haven't heard anything more specific than that. Okay, so I guess Professor Hamilton's not around. Mom and Grandpa haven't had any luck in contacting her either. I'm not surprised since that area isn't very well connected, but it's still unfortunate. She's a lot more personable than Professor Schmidt, so having her on our side would help a lot. Anyone's more personable. Tita could only laugh. Yeah, there's a lot of worrying stories going around about the PMCs and stuff like that. I don't even know. PMC? What's that? Anyways, it makes me wonder if none of this would even be happening if she was still acting as an advisor for the Vernon Company. The deeper into this conversation they went, the more Tita could feel her spirits sinking. The political climate in Western Zemuria was unusually stable at the moment, with its nations basking in prosperity. But she could not shake off the feeling that this peace was built over rotting wood, and that it could all come crashing down with the slightest provocation. This was becoming especially true in the tech world, as it had undergone rapid growth in recent years compared to other fields. So rapid, in fact, that no base could possibly sustain its sudden weight without cracks beginning to form. Try not to dwell too much on the worst case scenario, Tita. This peace may rest on a knife's edge, but there's still plenty we can do to preserve it. That's why I'm here, alright. That's also why you're working so hard too. We could find a million problems in the world if we wanted, but pessimism isn't going to make them go away, right? The words filled Tita with the right amount of comfort she needed in that precise moment. Yeah, I guess you're right. Thanks, Ren. Oh boy. They continued on, losing track of time as they talked into the night. Before they knew it, the clock had struck 12. Well, it's getting really late, so I should probably be going. I'll talk to you soon, okay? Alright, good night, Tita. Night. Oh. Tita suddenly remembered something, exclaiming... The exclamation stopped right as she was about to end the call. Estelle and Joshua told me to ask if you're doing okay in school. Those two always worry too much. You'd think I wasn't talking to them, too. She couldn't help but remember her interaction with Ronald after class, but Ren quickly drove the thought from her mind. It wasn't worth dredging up. Tell them they can rest easy. Everything is fine. Good. They wanted me to let them know if you were being bullied so they could fly over and help. Ren could only sigh. Honestly, do they think I can't keep myself from a few schoolyard bullies? Actually, they said they were more worried about what you do to them rather than what they do to you. That's fair. At her friend's silence, Tita couldn't help but burst out laughing. I worry about you too, obviously, but they're probably right. How awful of you. Even if that were to happen to me, I wouldn't do half of what you're imagining. Not anymore, anyway. See, it's saying that kind of thing that makes people worry. I'm a lady now. I need the magnanimity to forgive the transgressions of others. I'm also trying to do what I can to avoid standing out too much in school. You can try, but I think that's always been a lost cause. Anyway, now I'm really gonna go before I remember anything else. Say hi to Zin for me if you run into him. I'm planning to go and see him when everything calms down here, so will do. I've been meaning to go see someone else I've been indebted to in the past, too. Ooh, that's a reference. We'll talk about that later. Well, actually, I don't think we'll talk about that till we actually play the Calvert games, but yeah. By the time the two of them had finished talking and ended the call, one day had given way to the next. The morning dawned yet another day of school. I think this isn't going to be much of a spoiler, but I think this thing that's happening right here might actually take place after the first Calvert game starts. Not by much. It might be like a month before, but I don't remember what month it exactly starts in 1208. The morning dawned yet another day of school. However, just as she left her classroom in the main building at the start of lunch and went to descend the staircase, she felt someone suddenly draw near her from behind. Reflexively, she dodged out of the way. A female student then entered her field of vision. She had lost her balance, her expression a mix of fear and surprise. She passed through the spot Ren had been moments before, but her momentum showed no sign of fading. If someone didn't stop her, she was going to start tumbling down the stairs. Oh, so it's not someone who was attacking her, she just tripped. Ren was quick to grab her and pull her close. She supported the girl's weight with one arm, with all the grace of someone taking part in a ballroom dance, saved her from falling. Several students happened to witness the event unfold and could not help but elicit gasps of admiration. Noticing the girl's eyes were still unfocused, Ren gently addressed her. Are you alright? You aren't hurt, are you? Finally realizing the situation she was in, the girl whose face had become quite red quickly straightened her posture in a fluster. Yes, I'm okay. You're Ren Bright from the next class over, aren't you? Thank you so much for helping me. You're very welcome. but I would have to caution you from losing your composure like that right next to a staircase. Do you have some really urgent business to take care of? The girl first frowned in response, then paused to think and then answered. Nothing I can think of. It's weird. But even though it was probably my imagination, it felt like someone had pushed me from behind. Obviously, no one here would do that, so I must have just bumped into someone by accident. She thanked her rescuer again before disappearing into the distance. The situation she had deemed her imagination, however, lingered in Renne's mind. If I hadn't sensed something was amiss, both of us would have fallen down the stairs. We could have been badly hurt. Was it really just a coincidence, or was it a deliberate action by someone who wants to hurt me? If it was the latter, she didn't have anything to support this theory, but with it came a familiar sensation. The feeling of malicious stares focusing on her from the shadows. It took surprisingly little time for her suspicions to gain evidence. After finishing gym class the next day, Renne made for the classroom and began prepping for the next lesson. As she did, she immediately noticed something was amiss. All of her textbooks have been glued shut with an excessive amount of adhesive. Okay, this is petty. Try as she did to open them, it was a lost cause to even get a single page. It was an obvious attempt to harass her. The culprits behind the act were equally obvious. Not far from where Renne was sitting, Ronald Griffith and his lackeys, whom she so memorably turned away 2 days prior, were snickering to themselves. Their eyes mockingly focused on Renne all the while. They're not even interested in hiding what they're like anymore. I'm sure at this point they want me to know who did it to intimidate me. The latest development also confirmed in her mind that they were responsible for trying to push her down the stairs the day before. What a pitiful sight they were. Because she refused to join their club, her existence was, in their eyes, now nothing more than a hindrance to Ronald's campaign for student council president. They would stop at nothing to either break her spirit, force her to join, or shame her in lowering her popularity among the student body. It didn't matter that Renne had no interest in taking part in the election. After further inspecting the state of her textbooks, Renne's expression grew difficult to read. I think I can make them usable again, but not in what little time I have before class. The bell soon chimed to signal the start of her lesson. Renne left her textbooks out on top of her desk, making no effort to open them throughout. Her instructor was, of course, less than pleased about this perceived slight against them, picking her to answer a question as an attempt to chide her poor behavior. Miss Bright, please read the next paragraph aloud for us. Ronald and his friends let out a series of pleased giggles at this, their minds still lighting at the thought of a flustered Renne being told off and humiliated in front of the entire class. But what transpired in reality played out very differently from their fantasies. Without missing a beat, Renne did exactly as she was told, reciting the selected paragraph she had been asked to read word for word. All while her textbook remained closed, so she already memorized all the work. Did you memorize the entire book? Even the instructor could not hide their surprise. But of course, as a student of Aramis Academy, I would never dare compromise in preparing for my lessons. Renne responded with such grace that she, of course, drew in more sighs and coos of admiration from both her instructor and peers alike. It was only Ronald and his posse who groaned with sullen expressions. The next incident came on Renne's way to school the next morning. She entered the school gates with a horde of other students and was just about to step into the building when she noticed a foul smell coming from above her. She looked upward, noticing a portion of the fencing surrounding the building's rooftop was falling directly above her. Other students noticed at the same time, letting out screams of horror and worries they could do nothing about. I could get out of the way easily if I wanted, but the fencing was over 2 yards in length. She could escape unharmed, but the other students around her would likely not. That was a risk she was unwilling to take. Grasping the battle orb in her bag, she cried out, "Airstrike!" A sphere of wind formed in response to her incantation, flying upward at high speeds. She carefully controlled its power so that instead of sending the fencing flying, it simply canceled out its momentum and instead allowing her to hop and catch it with ease. This was no accident. The spell makes it obvious. It was the distinct scent of liquid extracted from a certain plant monster. One of its properties was to imitate the natural corrosion of metal, resulting in its application in certain solvents. Okay, so they tried to drop it on her head. This made the fence falling a deliberate action the perpetrator had been trying to disguise as an accident, and with Renne having been the target of several malicious acts already, the culprit was clear. Again, she could feel the presence of those familiar hateful stares pouring into her from the shadows. But again as well, they were not the only ones with eyes on her. Whoa, that was awesome. Did you see that? Is there anything she can't do? Renne's quiet meditation was disrupted by a multitude of cheers and applause from around her. As if she were a performer just about to leave the stage, she gave an elegant bow in response. This would not be the last time she endured harassment from Ronald's group, but each and every time they thought they had bested her, she would handle herself with exemplary skill, their efforts only serving to make her more popular. Good job, guys. The state of affairs continued for several more days, before a seemingly out of patience Ronald summoned Renne behind the school building after lessons were over for the day. He stood oppressively before her, his lackeys behind him, with the composure he attempted to feign, before now replaced by a plain vile anger. And she's just like, got her usual smile. Let me give it to you straight, Renne Bright. You are an eyesore. Even that gentlemanly air he impersonated before was gone. Really? Well, that's not a very polite thing to say to a classmate. Don't try to act cute and innocent. I put too much damn time and mirror into building my position up at this academy. But who's always at the center of attention instead? Yeah, thanks to you, bud. It's you. It's always you. It's like you're deliberately trying to sabotage my chances of success. And that's the last thing I can afford right now. The more livid Ronald became, the more unruffled Renne was in turn. You're only sabotaging yourself by setting me up to succeed over and over again. You are aware of that, aren't you? Had she not been forced to defend herself against him over and over again, she would not have received nearly as much attention. This being pointed out caused Ronald to return an audible tut of frustration. Who cares about how it happens? The point is, this has gone on long enough, so I'm gonna have to ask you to step off the stage for a while. What do you mean? Ronald seemed to present some of his initial cool when they first talked as he answered. Oh, I mean something very simple. You just won't come to school until the election is over. And if I refuse? To this, he raised a hand in response. His lackeys stepped forward to surround her. The boys were unusually well built for their age, showing off their hulking forms in hopes of intimidating her. Refusing is not an option, I'm afraid. If you aren't going to oblige me willingly, you'll have to make it so you can't come to school for a while. His lackeys cracked their knuckles dramatically to clarify their leader's intent. Well, that's no good. I think we both know that would constitute a grave violation of the school's rules. Something about her inflection caused him to mistake her commentary as showing a hint of fear, further fueling their desire to dominate the situation. No one's watching a place like this, and even if someone did happen to see, my father is a politician. He can make it go away. If they don't willingly choose to ignore what they saw in deference of my position, that is, everyone at this academy seems to already know their place, you see. Everyone except you. His smile then was so unpleasant that a sigh escaped Renne. Oh, I think you're the one who doesn't know your place. I don't want to be rough with him after what Tita said, but he needs to be taught a good hard lesson. Ronald continued on, oblivious to what was running through his apparent victim's mind. Now do as I say. His lackeys drew closer, readying to seize her. I'll keep it mild, but I still want this to hurt for them. Just enough to set them on the right track. I don't think Estelle or Joshua would object to that. But just as she was about to act... Stop this at once! A girl's shout could be heard from the direction of the school building. She was, of course, not shouting at Renne. And who are you? Ronald was visibly irritated. Though the girl appeared to be visibly nervous, she continued to stand her ground. Hello. I didn't mean to listen in, but I couldn't help but overhear what was happening here. You can't go through with this. What you're doing is wrong. The girl stepped forward until she was directly in front of Renne to protect her from her schoolyard bullies. As she did so, the light revealed sleek, dazzling blonde hair that shimmered much like the sunshine above. Renne recognized her to be a first-year student who lived in the dormitory next to her own. They weren't close to one another. At most, they only exchanged polite greetings with one another as they passed each other in the hall. She always seemed like a quiet, polite young woman with a good upbringing. However, not the type whose eyes would glow with resolve as she put her well-being on the line for someone else's. Renne was surprised by this, as was Ronald, though he was less than impressed. He never fathomed that another student would dare to resist him. One thing he did sense was that her resistance was little more than a brave front. With excitement at the thought of stripping that front bare, he grew a sadistic smile and addressed her. Is it now? Well, how fortunate for me I have you to show me the error of my ways. Renne can wait. You're a first year, I assume. I'm gonna need to give you a lesson of just how right and wrong works in our society. Upon his signal, his lackey shifted to surround their new target over Renne. She began to tremble as danger closed in on her, but still she did not move. Don't you dare. This time it was Renne who spoke up. I'll give you what you want, so don't you dare touch her. But, haha, you sure about that? She wasn't planning on that response, but Ronald was more than happy to have his win in any form. I'll stay away from school for a while, that's what you want, right? But then you... The experience of studying abroad has been rather tiring for me, so maybe I do need some rest. Renne's voice was gentle in an attempt to assuage the girl's concerns. Ronald, meanwhile, made no attempt to hide the joy he felt at victory, laughing heartily with all the glee of a spoiled child. Good, now everyone knows their place here. I see no reason to harm either of you now that I've got what I want. Consider yourselves lucky that I've decided to let you go. Ronald turned away and made to leave, his lackeys following suit. Good day to you then. When we next meet, this school will be all mine. And he was gone. With only the girls left behind the school building, the younger of the two looked up at her senior, concern welling in her expression. I really am all right. You're very kind to worry. Renne's smile was one of genuine kindness. From then on, Renne did indeed stop coming to school, citing illness as the official reason behind her absence. The students then gathered in the Academy's auditorium several days after the long-awaited student council election. Aramis Academy, as a whole, placed great importance on the autonomy of its students, and as such, the student council exercised an unusual amount of power. It also weighed upon them a massive amount of responsibility, such as being the sole planner for the Academy's festival, a symbol and celebration of spring in the capital. This, however, also led to the position being a major status symbol even long after graduation. Okay? All of this was why a large number of students put their names forward to become the student council president each year. Much different than it was at the branch campus. Yet this year, a great majority of the most promising candidates dropped out under mysterious circumstances, leaving only Ronald and others associated with him on the ballot. I couldn't exactly boast about winning by default. Ronald and his supporters sat in the rest area, chuckling among themselves at the whole affair. Perhaps his name wasn't the only one on the ballot, but none of the others had done any certifiable campaigning, meaning his election was positively assured. Eventually, the time came for him to give his speech. It was a compelling one. He played the part of a respectable young gentleman as he delivered it, speaking with the same silver tongue he inherited well from his father. There were some moments where he failed to hide his arrogance, but as no one had prepared a speech to give, this was not the blow to his campaign it otherwise would have been. Now, if you could turn your eyes to the screen. The screen he spoke of was at the back of the auditorium. It was a rather notable feature to have in a school building, to have anywhere, and was installed several years prior to use for lectures and display recreational films. Other nations had yet to indulge in such luxuries, showing just how far ahead Calvert was in its technology. Yeah, you don't really have films in other places. You have the Arc and Seal for entertainment like that, and then of course you have like the radio. Up until then, students had used it to display photographs during their speeches, but Ronald intended to take it one step further. He wanted to share a promotional video, and not a simple makeshift self-produced one that might ordinarily be presented by an amateur, but rather a professional work he paid a considerable amount of mirror for. Its quality was genuinely impressive. His victory was written in stone, but this he knew would cement it in that much more. Convinced it would serve as the perfect beginning to his ascension to the top of the social hierarchy, he started the video. The musical number it played was rousing, fitting. What followed then was Ronald appearing on screen. So how much mirror do you want for supporting me? I can make it worth your while. What? The video playing before them was not the one intended. Rather than an inspiration shown of what he could bring to the student body, it was a recording of him buying off one of his opponents just days before. As hushed whispers of confusion spread throughout the auditorium, the next clip played. If you know what's good for you, withdraw your candidacy right now. Or the only thing you'll be present of is a hospital bed. That's not a very good comeback. The only thing you'll be present of is a hospital bed. But what present of a hospital bed? What does that even mean? Next was an equally unexpected scene of Ronald intimidating another candidate into withdrawing from the race. As it continued, Ronald realized what was going on. Someone out there had replaced his carefully prepared video with another. The initially hesitant whispers exploded into loud enough murmurs that he had to raise his voice over them in an attempt to quell the situation. This is all forgery. Someone is attempting to frame me. But at just that moment, as if waiting for his cries of denial, a girl's voice resounded from the auditorium's entrance. I'm afraid it is all entirely genuine. Her voice rang out with wonderful clarity, charming all who heard it. She ran her hand through her violet hair and flipped it back as she talked and walked toward the stage. Bribing potential threats, blackmailing, threatening, even executing violence against others, and many other cases of bullying besides. You are guilty on every single count, Ronald Griffith. Before anyone could fully understand what was happening, the student was on stage staring Ronald down. All eyes were fixed on this elegant figure. Indeed, without any effort at all, she had the air of a protagonist from some epic tale making her long-awaited appearance. Damn it, Renne Bright, must you insist on getting in my way at every turn? He growled through a sheet of sheer anger. In contrast, the recently absent Renne responded with brilliant composure. You are the one getting in the way of the fair running of this important election. Your countless crimes have made a mockery of the whole process. Renne then turned from Ronald to the rest of the student body as she continued to list his crimes along the still-running video. Some elicited frowns, others sympathy, others complete silence. But by the time she was finished, all were united with a single overpowering emotion: anger. It brings me no joy to say this about a fellow student, but I am afraid it must be said. Ronald Griffith, you do not deserve to even attend this prestigious academy, much less be the president of its student council. Similar censure from the other students followed in rapid succession. Where are the teachers? Yeah, she's right. Stop ruining our academy. You've gone too far. Renne's accusation wasn't the only reason for their anger. The students of Aramis had long loathed Ronald's oppressive behavior. Where's all his supporters now, huh? They only hadn't spoken out before because they were afraid of his father's power. Now that they realized he could be stopped, their anger had reached an explosive boiling point. Ronald suddenly found himself at the center of a torrent of abuse. He looked to his lackeys for support, but even they refused to meet his gaze. Yup, look at that. They weren't friends, they were obeying him. But now that everyone's against him, they have nothing to obey anymore. It then dawned on him just how fragile all he thought he built was. Rage gave way in an instant, deep despair, and casting a glare of pure hatred toward Renne, Ronald hurriedly sprinted out of the auditorium. Only when he was completely out of sight did an air erupt with cheers of joy. In the end, addressing the aftermath of the election took long enough that by the time she left for the gates, it was already evening. Yet, even with how late it was, instead of walking the usual route home, she stepped off the path to enter an entirely unoccupied park. How does this work? No one is going to interrupt us here, so how about you come on out? In response to her words, Ronald emerged before her for the first time since he ran away earlier in the day, with 10 or so companions in tow. These men weren't his usual lackeys, but instead, vicious figures with dark expressions and gaudy clothing. They were clearly not students of the academy. More than likely, they belonged to some local gang. You don't keep very good company outside of school, now do you? With how you're dressed up, I assume you must be off to a party or something. I'm going to wipe that smug smirk right off your face for good, Renne Bright. My dazzling future in politics was guaranteed, but now you've gone and ruined everything. What am I supposed to say to my father now? That's your problem, not mine. Or are you so small, man, you can't own up to the consequences of your own mistakes? Not a second passed between his outbursts and the manner in which she snapped back, causing his temper to grow twice as vile. That's it. I don't care what it takes. You are going to pay for thinking you can cross me and get away with it. Have at her. There won't be any consequences for going too far. My father will see to that. The men sprung into action upon Ronald's signal, but what followed made them doubt their eyes. Yep. Look at that. She had her scythe on hand. Ronald could not understand what just unfolded before him. His eyes relayed the information well enough, but his mind rejected it completely. The second after he ordered his new lackeys to attack, Renne had produced a monstrously sized black and gold scythe from thin air. Well, these guys are done for. That in itself was beyond comprehension, but it wasn't the last thing to be so. The scene was like a cat toying with a powerless cornered mouse, except in this shocking case, Renne was the cat and his men were the mice. They surrounded her at first, yet all it took was a single swing of her conjured weapon to cause most of them to collapse to the ground. In less than 10 seconds, their confidence had crumbled with their bodies. The mice made to scurry as fast as they could, but the cat gleefully gave chase. There were even moments where she let a few think they had gotten away, only for her to immediately close a gap between them. It was only after she was bored that she would knock them unconscious like the rest, and then she would seek delight in her next hunt. Like heavy sacks of potatoes, the men fell one by one, until only Renne and Ronald were left. This can't be happening. The young man was still struggling to come to terms with what he just witnessed as Renne stretched her limbs like a bored child still gearing up to play. Amateurs, every last one of them. I thought I could at least have a little fun. Oh, but don't you worry, I didn't actually slaughter them. She turned her gaze from... I don't know how you don't slaughter them. It's a scythe. It's not like there's a blunt part on it. She turned her gaze from the spectacle to her own creation to Ronald. Well, look at that smile. Would you be open to giving me a little more entertainment, perhaps, Ronald? Ronald twitched in fear as the mention of his name... at the mention of his name. In this moment, she was nothing more than a beast in human skin. Stay away from me. My father's in Parliament, you know. Try anything on me and you'll regret it. Her response was an expression of pure pity before tossing what appeared to be a magazine at his feet. It's one of today's tabloids. You might find its contents relevant. What? At first, he was baffled by the ship, but then, the second he peeked at the cover, his face went pale. Representative Griffith, suspected of bribery and connections to organized crime, read the headline in giant, punchy lettering. There's a whole special feature on your dearest daddy, complete with evidence. It mentions that the CID is going to be conducting an investigation as well, so this may be the last day you can say he's in Parliament. My condolences. No. So visceral was the shock at the news that even the simple word was all he could muster. Even then, Renne wasn't finished. So now that he's been removed from the equation, I'll ask again. Would you be open to giving me a little more entertainment? She edged closer and closer, scythe in hand, and a sadistic smile lacing her lips. Ronald tried to retreat in fear before tripping over a rock and falling hopelessly on his backside. All he could do was watch her as she were the Grim Reaper, tears and snot streaming down his face. Be a doll and play with me, then you'll understand why they used to call me the Angel of Slaughter. Oh boy. She raised her scythe above her head and ready to swing it downward before realizing what she said. Oops, a grown woman wouldn't play with dolls. Though, would she? And here I thought I could do better to control my childish glee. She covered her mouth with her free hand, brushing with feminine modesty at her slip-up. None of this was behavior befitting the proper lady she wanted to reflect. After composing herself, she turned her attention back to her prey, only to see he was already unconscious. Finished? As she left the park, the calm young man cried out to her. Or called out to her. I certainly am. Renne met eyes with a brown-skinned young man leaning covertly against one of the trees. It was safe to assume he had witnessed the entire affair unfold. Oh, hey, I know this guy too. You guys will meet him later. He glanced inside the park for a brief moment before speaking with slight but genuine admiration. You really are something. In what way? In every way, even if I was more struck by the hacking abilities of the famous Kitty than the combat prowess of the infamous Angel of Slaughter. Still hard to believe you managed to find dirt on his bigwig dad that easily. Oh, so Renne was the one responsible for his dad being arrested and found out. Renne's response was matter of fact, showing no sign his praise had gone to her head. Most people just aren't as cautious about cybersecurity as they ought to be. Understandable with how new most of it are to it. Of course, it isn't nearly as easy as when you're dealing with leading corporations and politicians at the top of the food chain. You made it sound like you've tried it before. Hey, maybe I have. Renne's smile was both cryptic and daring. I've been more impressed with you. You were quick to write a piece that scathing while also finding me the proof I needed. I'm glad Grace introduced us. Oh, I didn't even know Grace knew him. Just doing my job, which gives away what his job must be, if he knows Grace. Oh, well, here we go. Okay, I don't have to hide it anymore. The man's name was Dingo, and he was a professional reporter for a tabloid. He was extremely capable at his job, very well connected, and had a reputation for never shying away from danger. After being introduced by one another by Grace Lynn, he and Renne made a deal with one another just a few days prior. The terms were simple. Dingo would provide Renne with proof of Ronald's misdemeanors, and Renne would use her hacking abilities to provide evidence of his father's crimes. Both were now reaping the rewards of each other's success. Though I'll admit, I did get some help from a friend. He was none too pleased about being asked to look into a scummy politician's equally scummy son, but he pulled through. Oh, you just have all kinds of connections, don't you? She did sense someone other than Dingo was acting on her behalf while she was off school, but she wasn't sure who that someone was. The curious sensation regarding their identity remained as she continued the conversation. You know, I'm surprised you didn't meet with any resistance in running that story. That just goes to show how big a fan the government was of Griffith. They left him alone because they didn't actively oppose the current president's party, but from the CID's perspective, this chance to take him down was about as good as it was going to get. That does sound like something Miss Taito Master over there would do. I can't say I like the feeling of being used by her, but oh well. Dingo then made a curious observation. I have to wonder why you went to such lengths to get rid of a small fry like him. He really bothered you that much? Renne glanced briefly at Ronald, still collapsed on the ground of the park before shrugging her shoulders dismissively. Not in the least. I didn't intend for this to go as far as it did either. I only wanted to teach him enough of a lesson so he'd leave me alone, but... It was then the younger student who tried to save her came to mind. I think the students deserve a much better student council president than him. She then let out a titter that was most refined. As Renne expected, the allegations led Ronald's father to resignment from Parliament Well, he resigned from Aramis Academy. The group of students who exerted power over the student body and his backing vanished overnight as a result, bidding peace to return to the grounds for the first time in too long. One thing, however, came to mind from this that Renne did not expect in the least. Here are all the documents relating to next month's budget. The student council's new president accepted the documents from the blonde-haired first year in charge of general affairs, perusing them straight away. After Ronald dashed from the auditorium on the day of the election, most of those in his group who put their name down dropped out in a timely fashion. Voting still took place even then, but once all was said and done, nearly 70% of votes were cast were disqualified. This was because they were all in favor of someone who never put her name on the ballot, Renne Bright. So 70% of students wrote her name. Interesting. Aramis Academy was known for how little its staff interfered with the many liberties it gave its students, but this time, the staff was clearly concerned that dissatisfaction with Ronald was going to present dire problems in the future. The teachers then chose to directly negotiate with Renne, and in the face of such fervent demand, she reluctantly accepted the position of student council president. None of her duties posed a challenge to her, but by accepting it, she had completely and utterly failed in the initial goal of avoiding attention. I wonder if this is going to be how Thor's branch campus first student council president felt when he was elected. Even I couldn't believe it when Tina told. Oh, this is Ash, yeah. Alright, it is what it is, I suppose. I'll just have to make use of this the best I can. Sunlight beamed into the student council room. The blonde-haired girl and her two friends struggled with the new workload they were adjusting to. As Renne sat there, ears open to random talk and occasional grumble, a thought crossed her mind. She had no end of real-world worries. The problems arising from rapid technological development, the society's next move, the ominous winds of change blustering over Calvard. But despite all the saying, she wanted to enjoy her simple time here while she could. Let's say we get this work done so we can celebrate with a tea party, The arrival of spring was now a distant memory, even if summer had yet to come. There was nothing particularly spectacular about this time. It was just another ordinary, beautiful, bright afternoon. An unconventional student. The end. Alright, now we have our third story. So, that was the end of An Unconventional Student. So, Renne goes to Calvard, to Aramis Academy, to continue her schooling as an exchange student. She obviously has a run-in with a certain bully, and ends up being the student council president. Obviously, there's going to be a lot more that has to do with Renne's life in Calvard, but you can be sure that we'll be running into her when we make our way there as well. But yeah, so we have one more story to go through before this playthrough is officially done, which is the one right here, Forward Sword in Hand. So we're going to handle that next time. So that's going to be it, guys. Hope you all enjoyed. Don't forget to subscribe for more if you're new to the channel. I'll see you all next time. Have a wonderful day, everyone.